Welcome to the meeting. This is the appointed time. So let's invite the administration to come in first. And meanwhile, by way of background, let me explain to members what we are going to discuss at today's meeting. This subcommittee will discuss the proposed resolution under the Loans Ordinance. It should be passed by way of positive vetting. The proposed resolution seeks the Legislative Council's approval for the government to borrow for the purposes of the Capital Works Reserve Fund for the Infrastructure Bond Program and the Government Sustainable Bond Program for sums not exceeding in total $900 billion or equivalent, which is the maximum amount. Now, this is the purpose of today's meeting. Members, let me first seek your views on whether we should invite members of the public to give their views on the proposed resolution. So, members, let's see if you find it necessary to invite them to come. Alternatively, we can invite written views from the public. So, any views? Professor Priscilla Leung. Written views, please. Let's follow the established practice. I don't think we need to hold a public hearing. So you agree that we should just invite written submissions from the public? Right. No need to hold a public hearing then. The Secretariat will post the relevant information on the LegCo's website. The Secretariat will also send invitations to the 18 district councils. Now, without further ado, I will invite the administration to walk us through the proposed resolution. So let's have the administration walk us through the paper, and then I'll allow members to ask questions. Thank you, Chairman and members, for helping us examine the proposed resolution. Let me explain what this resolution is about. According to Section 3(1) of the Loans Ordinance, we propose the resolution for approval by the Legislative Council so as to implement the proposal put forward by the Financial Secretary in Budget 2026-27. And that is for the two bond programs under the Capital Works Reserve Fund, namely the Infrastructure Bond Program and the Government Sustainable Bond Program, the maximum amount of borrowing should be raised from $500 billion to $900 billion. Let me briefly explain why we propose to raise the borrowing ceiling. Now, as a matter of background, in fact, in 2024, the Legislative Council approved the increase of the borrowing ceiling from $200 billion to $500 billion. We propose a further increase because of two major things that happened in the past few years. As a result, there is a need to scale up the government bond programs under the Capital Works Reserve Fund in order to fund capital projects. Now, I think members are fully aware of the practices. We have the operating account under the government accounts, and that's to pay for social welfare and education expenses. And we also have the capital account that covers Capital Works Reserve Fund. The fund is supported by land revenue, and it is used to fund capital works. Now, according to the paper, in the past 3 financial years, from 2023-24 to 2025-26, every year we received less than $20 billion in land premium receipts. And that's comparing to the $140 billion of receipts during the peak. We receive much less nowadays. In terms of the Northern Metropolis, I understand that many members just visited Northern Metropolis. Capital Works expenditure, meanwhile, increased from $86 billion in 2023-24 to to 125 billion in 2025-26. And it is expected that it will go up to 128 billion in 2026-27. So, by way of calculation, in terms of land premium receipt in the past 3 years, we received less than $20 billion for 3 financial years. To pay for $128 billion of capital works expenditure. Because of this major gap, there is a need to issue bonds in order to fund the capital works, and we have been doing so. In fact, in the past financial year, we just issued bonds to the tune of $185 billion, and the Financial Secretary just announced that in the coming 5 financial years, this amount will go up from $160 to $220 billion. As a result, there is a need to increase the borrowing ceiling to $900 billion. But I'd also like to explain to members that even with the increase in borrowing ceiling, the bond issuance will remain at a highly prudent level, because comparing to some $3 trillion of GDP, the debt to GDP ratio will only increase to 19.9%, which is still highly prudent. In terms of this level of debt, I'd say that comparing to other developed countries or developed economies or advanced economies, it's a very healthy level. In many developed countries, the debt ratio could be a 3-digit figure, and our level remains at less than 20%, so it's relatively healthy. And I'd like to confirm one thing with members. All revenue from bond issuance will fund infrastructure expenditure. It's a long-term investment. It will not be used to pay for education and other social recurrent spendings. So it's a relatively lower moral hazard, so to speak. I hope members will support this proposed increase in borrowing ceiling for the long-term development of Hong Kong. So perhaps I'll stop here, and we'd be happy to take questions from members. The Hong Kong MA representative and my team will be happy to answer all questions. Right, thank you. Let's see if members would like to ask questions. There are 9 waiting to speak. So I'll give each member 4 minutes question and answer. Let me read out the names of the 9 members who would like to ask questions, starting with Ms. Christine Fong, Ms. Carmen Kan, Ms. Nixie Lam, Mr. Bill Tang, Mr. Robert Lee, Mr. Chan Pui Leung, and then the 7th member, Mr. Albert Zhang, Mr. Ronick Chan, and the last member to speak, Professor Priscilla Leung. Ms. Christine Fong will kick off. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Permanent Secretary and the Hong Kong MA representative for coming. It's easy to start a business and difficult to keep it afloat. Now, in order to invest in the future of Hong Kong, we need to do both. This proposed resolution seeks to increase the borrowing ceiling from $500 to $900 billion. Legislative Council's approval is required, so we need to be very careful. In recent years, countries like South Korea and Finland have seen a sudden surge of debt to GDP ratio due to a number of factors such as geopolitical risks, aging population. And in order to ensure fiscal prudence in the long run, in Hong Kong, I have a number of questions. First, can we set a red line for the debt to GDP ratio expressed in percentage terms? Second, we should set up a reserve for repaying debts to show the world that we do exercise fiscal prudence. Now, the other point is in terms of major bond issuance. For example, to support the development of Northern Metropolis, we need to explain to the public, including disclosing the internal rate of return so that they know that we're investing in the future of Hong Kong. The third point is that we should enhance LegCo's function as the watchdog. That means for major items, the administration should report to us, and the reporting cycle should increase from once every once every quarter to 8 times per year. And also, I have a question about engaging an independent third party in the bond issuance process. Can you explain the vetting mechanism and the implementation details? P.S. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Fong, for the questions. We want to raise the borrowing ceiling from $500 to $900 billion. But as I explained just now, this level is low and healthy. Now, I understand that the research division of LegCo also recently published a study in terms of public finance. And let me quote from their study. According to their study findings, in a number of advanced economies such as Japan, Singapore, US, UK, the government debt to GDP ratio are respectively 103% to 229%, whereas in Hong Kong at the moment it's just 11.7%. If we are to raise the borrowing ceiling to $900 billion, we're just talking about an increase of this ratio to 19.9%. That's just a very small proportion of the government debts in other countries. Now, Ms. Fong is concerned about the payment of interest. This is a legitimate concern. In the US and UK, we're talking about 20% and 8.3%. In Hong Kong, it's just 1.2%, and that's 1.2% of total government revenue used for paying interest. So I don't think we need to set the so-called cap or red line for bond issuance yet. But if we are to raise the borrowing ceiling again, we must follow the established rules and practices and come back to LegCo for approval. Now, the second point is that Ms. Fong is concerned about capital works projects. Now, for capital works projects exceeding the amount of $50 million, we need to seek LegCo's approval, including the Public Works Subcommittee and the Finance Committee. For capital works projects covered by the government sustainable bond program, like Ms. Fong said, an independent certification agency will have to be engaged to ensure compliance with the relevant ESG or sustainability requirements. Only with the certification can we include this project in the program. We also need to show investors and other institutions that we are doing that in order to instill confidence in them. Next, Ms. Carmen Kam. Thank you, Chair. In 2024, I was a member of the subcommittee to scrutinize the similar resolution, that is to raise the borrowing ceiling from $200 billion to $500 billion. In fact, some members already expressed their views that since the delivery of the budget last year, the borrowing ceiling already increased from $500 to $700 billion. So simply put, why didn't the government propose a resolution back then? Why does the administration propose this resolution to increase the amount to $900 billion in one go? In 2024, along with Ms. Dari Lee and Mr. Ronald Chan, Mr. Robert Lee, we scrutinized the proposed resolution, and we agreed that back then it was very modest. That is, even if it's raised to $900 billion now, the debt to GDP ratio will only be increased to 19.9%. It can be used to fund projects like Northern Metropolis and other major projects. So I support the proposed resolution. But I'd like to know more about the payment of dividends. That is, in the long term, what will be done to keep the dividend payments at bay? The third question is about the mechanism. Is there a mechanism in place to make sure that the increased borrowing amount will not be used to pay recurrent expenditure? For example, this budget refers to the bond fund, $37 billion, which will be transferred to the consolidated accounts of the government. And there is a concern that, in fact, part of the sum can be transferred to the consolidated account. So is there a mechanism to stop that?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Khan. Speaking of our bond ceiling, in the previous budget, we have mentioned to raise the ceiling from 500 billion to 700 billion, but this time we are proposing a resolution on 900 billion. It is because we want to accelerate the development of Northern Metropolis so that we can further increase the Capital Works Reserve Fund. We don't want to put restraint on the development rate because of the limitation caused by the decreased land revenue. So the expenditure level will be increased from 100 billion to 120 billion. This is our plan in the coming 2 to 3 years. In view of that, we believe that the bond issuance ceiling should be increased to 900 billion in order to fulfill the needs in the coming few years. At this moment, speaking of our outstanding debt, it is about 41 billion. So last year, the maximum is about 500 billion. That is why we need to ask for a review in the resolution. And that's why in this year, we are proposing this resolution to increase the ceiling to 900 billion. This is responding to my first question. Last year, you still have headroom because it is still not up to 500 billion. Therefore, even there was mentioning about 700 billion in last year's budget, you did not come for a new resolution. You wait until this year. You understood correctly. Last year, if we look at the bond program, we don't see any imminent need to increase the borrowing ceiling. We are just giving a heads up. Is that time to respond to the remaining questions? Yes. Speaking of the use of bond issuance, the funds coming from bond issuance. The income from bond issuance will be used in 3 different ways. First, it will be spent on capital works, that is infrastructure. Second, it will be used to pay the matured bonds. Third, it will use to take care of the interest expenditure from the previous bond issuance. We are not planning to spend any income from bonds as a recurrent expenditure. Speaking of the mechanism on preventing us doing so, for all the incomes from the 2 bond programs, namely the Government Sustainable Bond Program and the Infrastructure Bond Program, under these 2 bond programs, let's say this year we have received 160 billion. So how is it going to spend on different projects? Everything will be listed out in details. Therefore, it will not be possible for us to switch certain bond income to others' recurrent spending of the government. According to our policy and according to our reporting to the Legislative Council, this is impossible for us to do so. You also mentioned about the bond fund. Allow me to cite part of our history. When the government first established the bond fund, the government was not planning to fulfill our needs in our financial spending, nor the infrastructure spending. It is just there to support the development of bond market. The establishment of bond fund is to issue bonds even when the government is not in need of extra fundings. Its existence will accelerate the development of local bond market. Well, Ms. Khan has put it correctly. If you look at this year's budget, excluding the expected income, expected spending on premium and interest, we still have the exceeding income of 37 billion. As advised by Financial Secretary, excluding some expected spending from the bond fund, the remaining 37 billion will be included in the recurrent account of the government. There will be a separate resolution submitted to the Legislative Council for approval. How are you going to control your interest spending? You have put it correctly, Ms. Khan. Generally speaking, for long-term bond, the interest rate will be higher. When we issue bonds, the HKMA has to consider the latest market situation. If we are in the interest hike cycle, we will not issue that much long-term bond because it will be meaningless for us to trap ourselves that way. That is why a couple of years ago, we tend to focus on short-term bond because if we are expecting an interest cut cycle, it will be rather silly for us to borrow long-term bond. Vice versa, we will have more confidence to issue long-term bonds if the situation has reversed. The issuance of long-term bond is also in line with the long-term cash flow need of infrastructure work. By doing so, we will not send a wrong signal to the general public, allowing them to think that we have to issue bonds very frequently. Among the bond, 1/3 of them are civil bond. That is about $5 billion. It is just a 3-year term. It is not a long-term bond. So we have to pay back the premium, the principal within 3 years. Sometimes it seems that we are in great need of refinancing, and that is closely related to our issuance of short-term bond. Or in the interest cutting cycle, we will be issuing more long-term bond. Allow me to add one word. We need to consider about the expenditure. You said that we only have a 1.2% of interest expenditure comparing with our GDP. You also mentioned about sovereign bond. In short term, it is taking up about 1/3 of our total issuance of bond. Can you update us? What are the pros and cons of borrowing in this way? What will be our expected spending? Because we're already having an interest spending of 1.2%. How would you control our interest spending? Because that will be incentive for us to control it. But I can't hear specifically. If you can provide us with some comparative figures, it will help us to understand more. Also, when we spend the money that we borrowed, that will be capital gain. From the budget, I learned that we can make money from borrowing money. How can it be correctly reflected? The provision of such information will also help us to consider whether we should allow you to issue bonds of up to 900 billion or up to 9 trillion. Please supplement later on. Next, Ms. Nixie Lam. Thank you, Chairman. In 2024, according to the documents, in May 2024, the government has come to us and asked for an increase of the ceiling to 200 billion. And within 2 years, the ceiling is increased by 4 times. Speaking of now, is 900 billion. We understand that the Northern Metropolis require a large number of funds. But we need to understand if there will be continuous submission of request of increased ceiling. And there is no sunset clause. As colleagues have mentioned, we have just approved a resolution 2 years ago, and now we are in wartime. Would there be another resolution in 1 year's time? This is a rather critical point to us. Of course, none of us can expect how the world economy will turn out or how the war will turn out. But at least I believe that the government would have certain scenario settings. How would you deal with different scenarios? We also hope that we are not authorizing you to withdraw funds permanently. In the funds, it is basically supported by land revenue. If the revenue is exceeding certain level, we first redeem certain bonds issues in order to make sure that we can, on one hand, borrow and also pay back our bonds. Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Ms. Nixie Lam. Thank you, Chairman. We do agree that when we have to develop Northern Metropolis, such a large-scale project, we cannot support its expenditure simply by the issuance of bonds or the Capital Works Reserve Fund. Therefore, we are supporting it with an integrated approach. Perhaps we can also lobby the market support in order to speed up the development, and on the other hand, to reduce the investment on the government side. Just like a sand-rich data set. It is a huge project. It is a 10-hectare project. A month ago, we have successfully invited tender. That is a listed company from Chinese mainland which has won the bid. Conventionally speaking, the government will finish land formation and build the roads before we invite for tender. But we are asking the future developer to take care of the infrastructure, and such spending will be reflected in the land revenue. They don't have to offer such a high price bid. In turn, they would be able to figure out the land formation and roads building. And this is decreasing the capital works investment on the side of government. The private sector will have a complete setup in order to have wise investment. I trust that when you visit the Northern Metropolis, you understand that in Hongshui-Q, there is a plot that is inviting tender, which has a deadline in early July. There you can find residential area and also industrial building, as well as some basic road building works. We are not just doing things conventionally, because we are not completing all the infrastructure work before we invite bidding. On the other hand, we are inviting the developer to cover certain infrastructures as well as the building of an integrated industrial building. So we are going to decrease the land revenue, and that is how we are going to take care of such issues in a multi-pronged approach. Chairman, my question is if such borrowing will be normalized. He is not responding to my question. If there are any crises coming out, how the government is going to handle it? I believe that the permanent secretary will supplement to it. Will borrowing become something normal? Well, of course, no one will want to borrow if we have sufficient fund. I trust that he should respond to me properly. Sure, go ahead. We have to consider our fiscal standing comprehensively. In future time, if we are capable of providing all the funds required, we will not consider the issuance of bonds. The reason why we need to take care of the capital works expenditure in a multi-pronged approach is because we are not just relying on bond issuance to take care of the capital works expenditure, especially in the Northern Metropolis. We have a diverse range of methodologies in order to meet our needs. Chairman has a very good observation. Perhaps you might ask, well, we have 600 billion in our reserve. How about you just run out of the reserve first before you have any borrowings? I don't believe this is the right way to do so. For any government or any institution, there needs to be some reserves. As Ms. Nixon Lam has rightly put it, since there are ever complicating geopolitics going on in the world, we believe that we should always have some reserves as our contingency fund. On the other hand, when we make borrowings, if we have good investment returns, that will be a good way for us to make wise use of our money. That is by investment. In last fiscal year, the interest rate is 3.85% when we issued a silver bond. As you know, from HKMA, we have a very good returns. It is a low double-digit level. Under such situation, if we have extra fundings, we can still issue bonds so that we can make good use of our financial resources. It is also stimulating the development of local bonds market.
Next, Mr. Bill Tang. Thank you, Chair. I support the proposed resolution moved under the Loans Ordinance. We are an international city. We want to develop the bond market, including the setting up of a platform and an improved relationship with the distributors, as well as the ratings of our bonds. I think these are important missions. At the same time, we also need to consider the public perception. We need to disclose data to instill confidence in the public. So let's say in 2024, we raised the borrowing ceiling to $500 billion. It was a drastic increase. Can you tell us, after this drastic hike, how much did we gain in terms of investment return, and how much did we have to pay for interest, so that the public understands that we are gaining more than we pay out? The second point is, after we increased the borrowing ceiling last time, was our international rating by the credit agencies affected in any way? If the answer is in the affirmative, how are you going to address that? The third point is that policy-wise, we do have a number of missions to fulfill, including internationalization of renminbi. The SCR government has issued government bonds denominated in renminbi. So what is our next step? Are we going to set a goal? Are we going to increase the issuance size? Because we around the world, there are heated discussions about the risks of US dollars, and how do we make sure that we can support the policy goal and help renminbi go international? Is there any insight you can share with us? Now, the last point is this. Now, this is coming from the FTU. We are of the view that government bonds and its return should go at least partially to improving people's well-being, and that's a guaranteed return for, say, the MPF. Now, for silver bond, there is a guaranteed interest rate of 3.9% or slightly above that. This is reasonable. However, this is about those investing in bonds. They are experienced investors. For MPF, the most members are just employees. They are not investors. So can you bring more benefit to the people? P.S. Thank you, Chair. I will answer Mr. Bill Tang's question on government bonds, interest payments, and rate of return, and then I will invite Mr. Hui from Hong Kong MA to answer the question on international rating agencies and renminbi bonds, and like Mr. Bill Tang said, whether we're going to issue more such bonds and whether we can invest in MPF. Now let me turn to the first part of the question. That's about interest payments. In the past 3 financial years, in 2023-24, we paid interest to a tune of $10.8 billion. In the last financial year, it's about $15 billion. It has to do with increase in government debt. We issued bonds to a tune of $100 billion, and we pay interest up to just $10 billion. So for this scale, we don't find it difficult to pay for interest. In fact, we only use what we gain from bond issuance on paying the debt, funding capital works projects. We're not going to use it directly on investment. We do have the public coffers that provides reserves. We keep this reserve level at $600 billion. And this sum is actually entrusted with the Hong Kong MA to make investment. In order to get a better return for paying interest. So it's not the case of issuing bonds to make further investment. I'll now give the floor to Mr. Hoi from Hong Kong MA. Thank you. To answer members' question about Hong Kong's rating given by these international rating agencies, things have remained stable. In fact, the outlook is positive. In the middle of last year, Moody's actually increased Hong Kong's rating from negative to stable for a number of reasons. Like the PS mentioned, Hong Kong government debt to GDP ratio remains on the low side, and we also have quite good fiscal buffer and fiscal reserves. And our per capita income level remains on the high side. So taking all these factors into account, the international rating agencies have quite positive comments about renminbi internationalization as well as government bonds. Now, indeed, the government bonds play a vital role in supporting the internationalization of renminbi. We started from scratch in terms of renminbi-denominated bonds. Last year, we increased to some 40% of total bond issuance. So that's quite a drastic increase. As for the tenor and the amount, we have extended the tenor from 20 to 30 years with an issuance size of 4 billion. And that reflects improved market liquidity. In 2023, we introduced a new mechanism that is we give priority to at least a portion of the government sustainable bond and the infrastructure and also green bond to MPF for investment. So this will provide stable stream of income and more reliable investment avenue. This is an established and effective mechanism. We'll continue to listen to views of the sector and of members as well. Can you tell us roughly the amount available for subscription? It's not appropriate for me to disclose this detail here because this may affect the interests of other prospective non-MPF investors. So in order not to affect market interests, we tend not to disclose the amount here. I don't think it's such a secret anyway. We can follow up on this point later. Next, Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Chairman. Now, this discussion focuses on raising the borrowing ceiling under the Loans Ordinance to $900 billion. I support the resolution. This will enhance our capacity in supporting capital works projects and overall infrastructure development to ensure sustainable economic development as well. In recent years, because of the fluctuations in land revenue, the government has issued bonds under the Infrastructure Bond Program and the Government Sustainable Bond Program. This is a good financing channel. It also helps Hong Kong fulfill its function as an international financial center. From the investors' perspective or the perspective of FIs or even the market, I think that this is a good deed. Now, in fact, in recent years, the borrowing ceiling increased from 200 billion to 500 billion, and then in 2025-26 budget, it was announced that it was further increased to 700 billion. This year's budget, it was announced that it would be further raised to $900 billion. Many members are concerned. Now, simply put, you explained that in the coming 5 years, the debt to GDP ratio will rise to 19.9% and is still rather low. Have you conducted any internal assessment about the possibility of further raising the borrowing ceiling from $900 billion? Because this is influenced by different factors. And some members are concerned about the tenors, and you explained that bonds of a longer term will be issued in the future, say 15, 20 years, and it will be pegged to other currencies other than the greenback, perhaps renminbi or even other currencies. So can you explain that as well? Last point. In the future, bonds of longer tenors will be issued. Now, if land revenue drops again and is worse than expected, then is there a stress test mechanism put in place? Is there a backup plan? If we have slow economic growth, if we do not have good revenue from land sale, then internally, will tests be conducted? P.S. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lee, for the 3 questions about the configuration of bonds, be it tenor and currency. I'll give the floor to the Hong Kong MA representative later. Let me first answer the first 2 questions. I thank Mr. Robert Lee for his support, and he has made a very good point. Apart from meeting public expenditure needs, we need to issue bonds to fulfill other functions as well. That is in the development of the financial market, especially the bond market. With the Legislative Council's support, if we're able to increase the borrowing ceiling from $500 to $900 billion, then in the coming 2 or 3 years, unless something major happens that is beyond our imagination, this ceiling should help us meet our needs. Now, apart from the Northern Metropolis, will there be other major projects that will cause a further increase in borrowing ceiling? I think we should adopt a wait-and-see attitude, but at least the government will have to come back to LegCo for approval. The next point is, like Mr. Lee said, because of the ongoing changing circumstances internally, we also conduct continuous assessment. That is, we have prepared contingency plans in the event of a black swan, and this is something that we do with Hong Kong MA, but I don't think it's appropriate to disclose further details here. I'll now give the floor to Mr. Hui from Hong Kong MA. About the nature of the bonds that Mr. Lee asked. Now, we consider 2 things when we issue bonds. First, currency, and second, tenor. As explained, our goal is to issue more renminbi denominated and Hong Kong dollar denominated bonds. Last year, both of these types accounted for 40% of the total bond issuance. We believe that this is a very good level. As for tenor, the PS mentioned that we want to issue bonds of a longer term. So, without increasing interest expenditure, we will strive to extend our interest rate yield curve. And we do have some institutional investors who are fond of longer term bonds. They are mostly insurers. And we do promote government bonds to them. we have fixed interest rates. As for, say, silver bonds, we adopt a floating rate mechanism to protect investors.
謝主席。
Next, Mr. Chen Puilang. Thank you, Chairman. I do support increasing the borrowing ceiling and also support the issuance of some longer-term bonds in order to support the development of our infrastructure. I have a number of questions. First of all, the type of currency of our bonds. You're also talking about the insurance company. I believe that they are one of the major stakeholders in this regard. We are issuing bonds using Hong Kong dollars and renminbi, but there are different products at the insurance company that use US dollars. What will be the ratio of issuing bonds in US dollars? Will you try to increase the proportion of renminbi products in order to support the profile of the insurance company? Second, about the tenor. Now you have set the level of long-term bond as 5 years or above. I understand that many insurance companies provide products focusing on bonds 10 years or even 20 years. Will you consider when you issue bonds of over 10 years? Second, in order to attract insurance company to purchase these kind of bonds, you are offering them different incentives. For example, under the risk-based capital system, you are offering them a huge discount. However, it only supports those insurance company. For the non-life insurance kind of insurance company, they will not receive such kind of preferential treatment. However, when we look at the development of Northern Metropolis, we see there are different types of insurance company covering the construction projects. Those are quite long-term as well. So under the capital system that support the long-term risk, would you also offer such preferential treatments to other insurance company as well? Permanent Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to defer questions regarding tenor and types of currency to colleagues from HKMA. Before that, I would like to thank Mr. Chen Puilang for these questions. If you look at the insurance company in Hong Kong, they always invest in government bonds in order to receive a prudent profile. Because of that, we are working very hard with HKMA as well as the Insurance Council in order to encourage insurance company to participate in this part of the market. Mr. Chen also mentioned about the calculation of premium offered by the Insurance Council. How can they benefit from purchasing government bond? We will look into it further with the Insurance Council. I would like to defer the rest of the questions to colleagues from HKMA. Thank you. Just now, Mr. Chan has mentioned an aspect that is very important regarding the issuance of long-term bonds to insurance company. For the 30-year bond of US dollars, it is about 4.9%. For those of 30 years, Hong Kong dollars is about 3.8%. Therefore, the cost is lower for us to issue Hong Kong dollars bonds. But of course, for the insurance company, it is less attractive. We are still exploring. We want to see how can we increase the attractiveness of Hong Kong dollars bonds issued by government. You also mentioned about the risk-based capital requirement. First, we want to diverse risk. We see many investors, including the insurance company, who would like to diverse their risk in terms of currency. Second, since there are more and more life insurance policy calculated in Hong Kong dollars and renminbi, they also need to control the risk caused by currency exchange. We will continue to explain it with different insurance company. Next, Mr. Albert Zhuang. Thank you, Chairman. I support the issuance of bonds in order to support our infrastructure. It will enhance our competitiveness, and it is also investing into our future. I strongly support that. I have a number of questions. First, I am glad to see the issuance of retail bonds. The upcoming bond is quite large in scale. Will you consider issuing more retail bonds so that the general public can participate? Just now, Ms. Christine Fong also asked about the economic benefits caused by it. I have a follow-up question. Normally, when government increase their spendings, it will bring forth some multiplying effect. I suppose that there is a detailed projection when you propose the increase of the ceiling to 900 billion. How much GDP increase will it cause in the future? Given the uncertain future, will you share with us what are your optimistic projection or conventional projection? Is there any economic indicators so that we can weigh to see if the 900 billion of bonds is worth the investment? Thank you, Mr. Albert Zhuang. Speaking of retail bond, we hope that we can focus on silver bond. This is to offer our senior citizens a prudent investment tool. We are in face of a dilemma, actually. If we issue retail bond, the issue cost and the interest will be much more expensive than the institutional bonds. If our target audience are the general public, for the younger ones, they have a lot of other options. If our rate is not attractive enough, then it will not be well received. That is why this is not where we want to enter into the market. As for the senior citizens, they are looking for investment tools that are prudent and stable. From the perspective of supporting our elderly or the covering social welfare, we do have other considerations. You also mentioned about the economic returns of infrastructure. This is something that we value. Taking Northern Metropolis as an example, if we have good infrastructure and good transportation, we are actually bringing up some positive effects to the land value in those areas. Apart from adding value to our land, we also hope that we can increase new industries coming into Hong Kong, especially those innovative technology sectors. It will accelerate the development of Hong Kong's economy and bring forth some diverse job opportunities for our younger population. We trust that it is hugely beneficial to our economy. But this is not some short-term economic returns that can be seen in that kind of model. I hope that you will consider that. Basically, you don't have a figure to provide for us. Myself included, there are 5 members who are planning to speak for the first time, and 2 members will speak for the second time. After Ms. Michelle Tang, I will draw the line because it will be almost 5:30 by then. Next, Mr. Chen Chen-ying. Thank you, Chairman. Infrastructure is crucial to a city's development. I understand that in recent years, the government has a limited revenue. Therefore, I do support the issuance of bond. I have 3 questions. For the existing bonds, there should be some repayment schedule, but I don't see that in the document. As Permanent Secretary has mentioned, part of the newly issued bonds will be used to repay the existing bonds, while part of the funds can be used to fund the public works. Can you provide us with the repayment schedule of the existing bonds so that we will have a better idea of the proportion between the new funds? Well, you said that the debt to GDP ratio is 19.9%. On one hand, we have a ratio that can continue to increase. On the other hand, 900 billion is a fixed amount, so it could be something dynamic. When you issue bonds, will you look at the quarterly GDP before you decide the amount of bond that you issue so that you can control it within the 19.9 level? Well, because so happened the GDP in a certain quarter has dropped, then the debt to GDP ratio might exceed 19.9%. I want to see if there has any mechanism to control that. HKMA also mentioned about the currency and tenor. Apart from that, there is another aspect, that is the issuance of bonds, because there are also some tokenized bonds. Hong Kong has always wanted to become a hub of tokenization. After lifting the ceiling, will you consider to put part of the bonds to tokenization so that you can attract some alternative investors? Then we will have a broader scope of investors coming into Hong Kong's market. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding tokenization of government bonds, I would like to defer these questions to members from HKMA. Just now, Mr. Chan has raised two other questions. Up to the end of March this year, the unpaid bonds of the government is up to 410 billion Hong Kong dollars. After this meeting, we will put together some information together with HKMA so that we can provide an overview for Legislative Council's members. In the coming 5 years, since we are extending the tenor of the bonds, we hope that the refinancing proportion of the mid to long-term bonds can also be reduced. This is actually our objective. Responding to your second question, I want to say that you have observed it very accurately. When we talk about debt to GDP ratio, this is certainly a dynamic ratio. In the budget, the Financial Secretary said that by 2031, that is in 5 years' time, if our debt is up to 900 billion, then it will be up to 19.9% of the GDP that year. It is based on a projected GDP growth in the 5 years. In this year's budget, we have also mentioned an expected economic growth, a nominal growth of 5% per year. This is the foundation of our calculations. But of course, as Mr. Chan has put it, there will be fluctuation on a quarterly basis. But still, we are looking at it in a mid to long term. So we will not restrain ourselves with comparisons on a monthly or even quarterly basis. For the remaining questions, I would like to defer it to members from HKMA. You have asked about tokenization of bonds. We are promoting the development of tokenization of Hong Kong's bond market through Hong Kong's bond program. Last year, we have invested 10 billion of government bonds into tokenization. We see the buying of up to 130 billion Hong Kong dollars. Apart from the investors focusing on digital assets, we also see some conventional investors starting to accept these type of bonds. We see it as something very positive. In the future, we will continue to issue tokenized bonds through the government bond program in order to attract even more investors. Well, the tokenized bonds, you mentioned that there are up to 10 billion. How many types are there? There are 4 types: Hong Kong dollars, renminbi, euro, and US dollars. These are tokenized Hong Kong dollars, tokenized renminbi, tokenized euro, and tokenized US dollars. Correct. So 4 types in total. Understand. Thank you. Ms. Priscilla Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I support this bond issuance. In Basic Law 107, the Hong Kong government is required to balance our budget. In Article 108, we have to upkeep our low tax mechanism. Because of these two constitutional limitations, our bond issuance has to be conventional. The Singapore government, in the previous decades, they constantly issue bonds. the interest rate is really low. It is not for general public. It is mainly purchased by the MPF of Singapore government. It has issued 1.3 trillion Singaporean dollars of bonds. Comparing with the amount of bonds in Hong Kong, we only have up to 900 billion, so it is not a huge amount. We also have 600 bond of reserve. I strongly disagree that we have to spend all we have in our reserve before we issue bonds, because we certainly need to invest. We are investing in hardware, that is infrastructure. I do agree. However, even education, it is also a long-term investment. I'm not sure, perhaps in the future, since we want to develop ourselves as an international education hub, we might need to invest a little bit more as well. You also mentioned about 19.9 debt to GDP ratio. I find it acceptable. There are a few things I would like to know more. The last time you have to issue bonds of up to 500 billion, and now you need to issue of up to 900 billion. So mainly it will be purchased by MPF and insurance company. Well, from the Singapore example, if the interest rate is low, people are rather uninterested. Can you be more specific in attracting investors? Because we are offering them a lot of benefits. Let's say the MPF. Of course, we adopt market economy in Hong Kong as they are. However, we can intentionally attract some institutional or major investors into our market. There are things that we can do because we can offer them preferential policies. Now, the MPF is governed by the market. At LegCo, we have discussed for rounds. We wonder if they have charges a large amount of administrative fees. We do have the bargaining chips. Right now, in Hong Kong, we do need funding. Issuance of bonds is something very normal. This is how we should educate our citizens. As long as we have some long-term and quality investments like Northern Metropolis or even the soft power like education, for this end, the issuance of bond is something very normal. There are some major investors that we need to attract so that they can also support these government projects. In long run, they will surely gain from such investments.
P.S. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Priscilla, Professor Priscilla Leung, for her support. I will invite my HKMA colleague to explain any new thinking on attracting major institutional investors as well as MPF investors. Now, to answer Professor Leung's question, Northern Metropolis is, of course, the major project, and it also has a university town. So this is one piece of infrastructure that we will support. Now, about the debt ratio, we need to consider three things. We need to, for example, set a clear goal that the purpose of bond issuance is to support the long-term infrastructure development in Hong Kong. Second, we have sufficient repayment capability. And third, we need to explain to members of the public as well as members in this council that any gain from bond issuance will be spent on infrastructural development and not on recurrent expenditure. So we're going to uphold strictly fiscal prudence. Chairman, I want them to be affirmative. I want them to affirm that they will be more proactive. I hope you take this affirmative view that after issuing bonds, you will do something to attract major players in the market to invest in them and not just let the bonds slosh about in the secondary market. So affirmative view on attracting major investors, like Professor Priscilla Leung said, we have different tactics. For example, in recent years, we placed our focus on, say, the Middle East. The CE also led a delegation to visit the Middle East. And in terms of Middle East investors, the number is on the rise, especially for longer-term bonds, and this is encouraging. The other point is about mutual access programs with the mainland market. In fact, 1 or 2 years ago, we established the Bond Connect, including southbound and trading for mainland investors. Now, we do have a mechanism to allow mainland investors to subscribe Hong Kong government bonds, especially those denominated in renminbi. It's a win-win, and it's a major source of revenue for us, as well as a risk diversion tool for mainland investors as well. The next point is about other tools in the toolbox, such as tax concessions. We have this preferential treatment so that we can attract more fund managers to set up presence in Hong Kong and issue bonds. Now, I don't think they have directly responded to my question, but anyway, just to add to that, Chairman, if you think that things are optimistic, there is no need to go further, then so be it. But for the longer term, we should attract the major players to come in order to support our social needs, right? Any follow-up response, we'll actively consider that with the Hong Kong MA. Next, Ms. Michelle Tang. Now, I represent the engineering sector, and I'm also a mother, and I'm always concerned about the future of my children. Just like all parents, we're always concerned about the future of our children, even when they grow up. Now, about this proposed resolution to increase the borrowing ceiling to $900 billion. Now, some members of the public have questioned whether this is a trick that the financiers use to increase borrowings and pretend to receive a surplus, whether there'll be increased financial burden on the next generation. Now, I fully appreciate where these concerns come from. At the same time, I understand that we have fiscal prudence in Hong Kong, and we always spend within our means. This is the basis of our success. However, in the face of economic transformation and development of technology, we need to be flexible and adopt new thinking, especially the interest rate has come down from the peak 2 years ago, and it's now cheaper to borrow money. This is the perfect time to support infrastructure development for the next generation so that we build a land reserve and build a livable city and invest in the long-term development in Hong Kong. So I support the government's resolution. However, we must not compromise risk control and transparency and accountability. I have 3 suggestions. First, for the Northern Metropolis flagship project, is it possible to engage a third party to conduct feasibility studies and investments and disclose this information to LegCo and public on a regular basis? Second, now in terms of debt to GDP ratio, can you set a very clear target and conduct reviews if a certain threshold is reached? Can you also tell us the repayment program and interest expenditure? Third point, can we empower the steering committee to supervise and manage risks in projects? The steering committee should comprise professionals such as engineers. P.S. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Tang, for the 3 suggestions, as I said, in terms of disclosure. Now, the Hong Kong SL government's books are highly transparent. For medium-range forecasts, if you take a look at the budget, in fact, here, page 7 refers to our revenue from bond issuance and repayment. And in fact, if we just break it down into expenditure of interest per year, we will be able to further increase transparency. But of course, we note members' comment that there is always room for improvement. Second point about Northern Metropolis and the overall economic assessment. Members are well aware that we're talking about a 20-30-year project. This whole project will not finish in one go. It will be completed in phases. We start with Hong Shui Kiu, Kutong, these new development areas, followed by the Santin Technopole, the I&T Park, the Loop. So in the coming 5 or 10 years, we're going to invest in infrastructure, as I mentioned. We are going to utilize our resources strategically. Third point, about bond issuance income and how the money will be spent. Every year, we publish annual reports and we release this report in the public domain. So do check our report, and we'll be happy to take views and comments from members. Right, next, Dr. Howie Simon Lee, and then I'll be the last one to speak. Thank you, Chair. I support the resolution. There are now different expectations on the government. Things have changed, including the concept of infrastructure. Infrastructure is not just something that supports the delivery of public service. It's also a kind of investment in the future. We need to spend our money wisely. Nobody would exhaust their own savings to run a business. You need to do your calculations properly and make sure that the gain will cover the overheads. In terms of the public coffers, now it's more complex. You need to consider the cost implications, the rate of return, and its impact on the economy, including a formula to calculate the return. Now, as other members mentioned, and as you answered other members' questions, you explained that what you gain will cover the cost. Now, can you give us more details? I don't see the details in the paper. P.S. Thank you, Chair. I appreciate Dr. Lee's concern on investing in infrastructure and the possible return. Now, when it comes to strategic infrastructure projects, such as constructing a railway line or a highway, we usually set out the economic benefits or the overall social benefits that will be brought about by the project in the paper to be submitted to the PWSC or the Finance Committee. When it comes to a single item, such as a public swimming pool or a fencing arena, and if we are to consider the cost benefit, it's hard to quantify the economic benefit. We can talk about how we raise the sports sector's profile in Hong Kong and support the elite athletes' development, but it's difficult to quantify the benefit. Now, are you happy with the answer, Dr. Lee? Well, I think that they just repeated the same answer. Do you want to go on? You've spent 2 minutes 49 seconds. Right. Let me have another go. As I said, it's very complex. And you cited the example of building a swimming pool. Perhaps members of the public will be happier, and that's one kind of gain. But when it comes to what what I said, public services, then it's difficult to calculate the cost-benefit correlations. It's the government's responsibility to provide public service, and people will be happier. And it's difficult to quantify it in terms of the rate of return. But when it comes to the Northern Metropolis and other major development projects, and in fact, I think that this whole resolution refers to the Northern Metropolis anyway. Things may be more complex. You need to tell us, after completing the Northern Metropolis development, the benefit will be so and so, and then I suppose you have a formula to tell us the cost-benefit correlations.
Chairman, your comments are well taken. Perhaps we can look into it further. In the future, when we bring forth any public works project, we will try to quantify the potential economic benefits or other benefits. If possible, we will provide more supplementary information. As Mr. Ho and Simon Lee has mentioned, it cannot be applied to every single public works project, like the public housing estates or the social welfare facilities. A sense of happiness isn't something that can be monetarized or quantified. I do understand your response. Just one suggestion. As mentioned at the beginning, since the role of the government and the expectations of the general public are ever changing, nowadays we are not just providing public services, we also have to make investments and to develop new industries. The mindset will definitely change. When we spend money, it will be impossible for us to take public money. Surely it has to be done through borrowings. If that is the case, well, as you have rightly put it, sometimes we will be able to calculate the cost recovery. Sometimes it involves a sense of happiness or the well-being of the general public. That is what I meant by a renewal of mindset. When you come to the Legislative Council, perhaps there needs to be such renewal in our concepts and definitions. Comments for the government. Well, the question asked by Mr. Ho Simon Lee is very valid. What would be the returns of our investment? Well, it would be difficult to tell if it is some public services. But if you are talking about innovative technology, then it is reasonable for us to expect certain points of GDP growth. Since we are investing through borrowings, what would be the differences or increase after borrowings? We also have to consider about the employment rate. For companies like Science Park, they all have similar concepts. If you provide such information for us, it will also support you to ask for further increase of borrowing ceilings. Thank you. Okay, it is now my turn. Now you are issuing bonds to support capital works. We also need to issue bonds to support our recurrent spendings. Speaking of capital works, well, if you look at the Northern Metropolis in the coming 8 to 10 years, we'll be spending money in Hongshui-Kiu as well as the loop, that is Hetao. Apart from these two, in the Northern Metropolis, there are 5 lots. We also have Lintong and Taokulang. What would be the overall spending on Northern Metropolis? There has to be an estimation, right? It doesn't have to be 100% correct. Among the 5 major plots, how much will you spend on Hetao, how much will you spend on Hongshui-Kiu, etc.? Then maybe the total will be 2 trillion, even 3 trillion Hong Kong dollars. out of the $3 trillion, how much will be invested from public funds? Or, like Permanent Secretary has mentioned, we will try to attract more investors. They will receive a discount on land revenue so that they can bring their own money for infrastructure works. Because we have been discussing Northern Metropolis for so many years, I trust that there is certain kind of detailed estimations. Today, you're asking for increasing the borrowing ceilings from 500 billion to 900 billion. How much will be invested in capital works? Well, perhaps it is not enough, but we want to remain our debt to GDP ratio at 19.9%. Is it possible for us to further increase? If 900 billion is not enough, maybe at the end it will require us 1.4 or 1.5 trillion. There has to be a ratio of government investment if we have other investors bringing in their fundings. There needs to be some mature and professional calculation. I trust that you have such figures. This is not necessarily a question from me, just my comments. I trust that you need to supplement such information for our consideration. We might have to give you our support without considering those supplementary information. But then we want to keep it on record so that you can be well prepared in the future. Second, I can't really understand, Mr. Kenneth Hui. You said that you would rather not tell. If we are willing to buy a certain amount of bonds, isn't it an even greater support to the market? Like the MP have, we have 1.5 trillion and we have 8.5% of return. Well, if the interest rate is just about 3.5%, then of course there will not be any interest in such borrowing because we will have a high interest rate in the private market. You sound mysterious, but I believe that these are all public data. Why is it so mysterious, Mr. Hui? We have preferential buyout at MPF. We are focusing on the book building bond issuance. There will be MPF investors submitting their request, and also there will be some market investors submitting their request. Publicly, we have announced that if there are MPF investors submitting their requests, they will be given preference. If other investors are aware that MPF investors is the majority, then the final amount of bond allocation that they will receive will be a fact that will hamper their intention. Well, fair enough. Second round, Ms. Carmen Khan. Thank you, Chairman. I still have 3 questions. You can have 4 minutes. Thank you. To scrutinize this resolution, the 900 billion will be used on Capital Works Reserve Fund. So I look at the memo for Capital Works Reserve Fund. It can be found in the related documents of our budget. Well, in 1982 January, well, actually it has been quoted in the resolution here. In second paragraph D, it mentioned that the Financial Secretary can allocate reserve funding that is not necessary to be a concurrent spending of the government. Second, apart from a returning principle, it can also use to repay the charges. So going back to NSB, that is the analysis on financial implications in paragraph 4. It said that for the funding that is to be spent can be held at the Capital Works Reserve Fund. So it is consistent. It will be used as the operation or reserve. Second, According to the existing arrangement of the government and HKMA, it will also be capped as the foreign reserve. The foreign currency reserve. Since we also have members from HKMA here today, since we are increasing the bond borrowing, how is it going to be impact? From D(1), it mentioned that there are some unused funds in Capital Works Reserve Fund that will be appropriate to the concurrent income of the government. How can you make sure that it will not be used as the concurrent expenditure? Thank you for your observations, Ken. It is actually correct. For the CWRF, as you have quoted in the scope of reference, what you mentioned are facts. In early years, when we have high income up to hundreds of billions as land revenue and just tens of billions as capital works, we have a huge revenue. About a decade ago, we do have done this once or twice. For the exceeding fund from CWRF, we have allocated to the operating income. But this is already history. It only happens when we have huge revenue in Capital Works Reserve Fund. As I have explained, we are having a shrinking revenue in Capital Works Reserve Fund because we have a reduction in land revenue while an increase in our capital works spending. That is why we need to issue more funds. In foreseeable future, we don't see any possibility of having a huge revenue under Capital Works Reserve Fund. And we also want to sway away from any misunderstanding. We don't believe that we should do that, because people might think that we can turn bond issuance income as our operational or capital reserves. I don't believe that it will happen in mid to long term. As you can understand, apart from the operational and capital reserve, we have about 8 existing funds, including Capital Works Reserve Fund, Innovative Technology Fund, etc. If the revenue is unused, we will bring it to HKMA as part of the investment under exchange fund. Let's say the Capital Works Reserve Fund have some outstanding amount that does not have any imminent need. We will not just keep it in the bank. Apart from the operational needs, we will allocate it to HKMA, which is the same as a general investment made out of our reserve. If you look at the average from the past 6 years of investment, they will offer us proceed to the government every year. So the calculation is exactly the same. Thank you for your response. If you look at Annex B, there is discrepancies in Chinese and English version. When you prepare the documents, I think you have to be more careful. In the Chinese version, you did mention about the limitation caused by the decrease in land revenue. The memo has been downloaded from your website. It is from this year. It is possible for us to have questions because you said that the extra funding in Capital Works Reserve Fund will not be allocated to our operational and capital reserves. So this can be kept on the record since we are mentioning it at the meeting today. Back then, you have exceeding land revenue and limited capital works expenditure, but the situation has reversed. We can find such description in the Chinese version. Surely there will not be any pending allocation. I can move on to the next question. Well, actually, this is part of the scrutinization of the resolution. Perhaps we can leave it until later. Yes, we can take care of it later. Thank you, Ms. Ken. Thank you for being so inceptive. Well, I find the majority of members showing the support to this resolution. I don't have anything else to add. During the meeting today, we have requested supplementary information to be provided after the meeting. I would like to ask the Secretariat to follow up. Now we will move on to scrutinize the resolution. I suggest us to focus on the Chinese version. As for the English version, we can leave it to our legal advisor. Administration. Chairman, I would like to defer it to Ms. Sabrina Law, Deputy Secretary. Thank you. Regarding the resolution, the administration have already issued the documents in the Legislative Council brief. In Annex A, you can find the content of the resolution. It is very similar to that we have approved in 2024. In 2024, we are lifting the borrowing ceiling from 200 billion to 500 billion. The writings is the same. The only difference is that we are lifting the borrowing ceiling to 900 billion. In bracket C, if this resolution is being approved, it will replace the resolution passed on the 8th of May. That is original resolution in 2024. That's all from me. Welcome if members have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Law. I think that the legal advisor would like to say something about the English rendition. Thank you, Chair. The Legal Services Division earlier made inquiry with the administration on drafting issues. Now, I invite members to refer to LS 14/2026 paragraph 14. Paragraph 4. Now, according to the administration, they seek to provide increase the borrowing ceiling for the infrastructure bond program and the government sustainable bond program in the future. Now, we asked the government why these two bond programs are not categorically stated. I urge members to note that in fact, when the relevant subcommittees were set up in 2018, 21, and 2024 for the proposed resolution under Section 3(1) of the Loans Ordinance, there were similar discussions and we made a similar inquiry with the administration. The administration on this occasion also replied by saying that a similar drafting style is adopted so as not to spell out the programs involved because this will limit the scope of the programs. Now, for details, please refer to the electrical background brief or the electrical brief because it sets out the legislative intent. Anything to add, Ms. Carmen Khan? Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned about this as well because according to the legal advisor in the footnote, it refers to the two bond programs, the infrastructure bond program and the government sustainable bond program. However, we scrutinize the resolution itself and not the note. So the resolution itself does not spell out the two bond programs. In fact, if we take a look at the supplement of the budget for medium-range forecast, it sets out, for example, $160 billion in 2026 and then $201 billion in 2027-28. So this breakdown is provided, but it's only a medium-range forecast. It doesn't provide further details as to how much will be apportioned to the infrastructure bond program and then the other part to the government sustainable bond program. So just by reading the resolution, I don't see any correlation with the Capital Works Reserve Fund. Ms. Law. Thank you, Chair. To answer Ms. Khan's question, in the past we proposed similar resolutions to raise the borrowing ceilings. The legal advisor asked similar questions and we provided similar answers. We want to keep things flexible. because in terms of sustainable bond in the international community, the scope is constantly changing. So we want to keep things flexible. About the breakdown of the $900 billion cap of borrowing, we need to have regard to the cash flow requirements of the sustainable projects and infrastructure projects under the two bond programs. In determining the issuance size, we don't find it appropriate to spell out the specifics in the proposed resolution, because we need to have regard to the projects included, the government's fiscal position, as well as market response. Thank you. Ms. Khan, well, I understand that the government would like to preserve flexibility, but how do we fulfill our role in monitoring the government? Will there be annual reports? Because by the time we receive the report, the things will have been completed. The other point is about the Director of Audit's comment. Now, for example, if it's not in line with the 3E principle, if it's not efficient, not cost effective, then they will give us a report as well. We will need to scrutinize the Director of Audit's report through the Public Accounts Committee. Thank you, Chair. To answer Ms. Khan's concern, in fact, this resolution covers two bond programs, and under each bond program, there are 9 specific uses provided. We can provide further information after the meeting to members. Now, for sustainable bond program, for example, they cover biodiversity, natural conservation, clean energy vehicles, green construction. And if these projects are within scope, they'll be included in the program. For infrastructure bond program, we're talking about the 9 specific uses for housing development under the infrastructure bond program. And then in the annual report, we make public the amounts spent and the specific projects. There is transparency. Chair, this is exactly my point. The information is only provided in the annual report every year. In fact, other members and myself already expressed concerns. I think more frequent reportings are required in terms of how you spend the sum on sustainable projects and infrastructure projects, instead of waiting for an annual report. For example, you can submit an interim report to the Panel on Financial Affairs on a half-yearly basis, because the executive and the legislature are supposed to work together. And I welcome the executive-led government. We have controlling officers being the first line of defense. We also have the PSGO. The Development Bureau has also set up an office to monitor and control project costs. Now, I want more frequent reporting, Chairman, because if we wait for the annual report, the information will not be up to date. Now let's see how the Secretariat will deal with this comment. For example, this matter may be referred to the Financial Affairs Panel, and then if it's within their terms of reference, perhaps they will ask the administration to provide a quarterly report on the bond programs. As for this subcommittee, we should focus on the legislative matters. That is, to increase the borrowing ceiling to $900 billion. Now, Ms. Khan has made a very good suggestion, but I don't think that anything binding can be agreed at today's subcommittee meeting. Now, this is a positive vetting process. It's not often that we have positive vetting here. So I do hope that this will be included as one of the conditions of approval. That is, for the administration to provide in the report how the proceeds of bond issuance are used, and that a frequent reporting cycle should be set up. Please consider this suggestion. Yes, PS? Chairman, we'll be happy to consider Ms. Khan's suggestion. Apart from publishing an annual report, perhaps an interim report halfway through can be published as well. But let me say this to members. The interim report will not contain every nitty-gritty as an annual report. It's impossible. But we'll try to work within our means and see whether we can further enhance transparency by submitting a half-yearly report to, say, the Panel on Financial Affairs, where we'll actively follow up on this suggestion. Next, Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Chairman. Now, we have come to the clause-by-clause scrutiny stage. I have two questions. Point A. Borrow from any person. I see this expression here. For any person, does it include legal corporates, retail investors, institutional investors, both locally and overseas? And then, next, for sums not exceeding in total $900 billion or equivalent. And I have a question on this expression, or equivalent. Now, if it says Hong Kong dollar, then it's easy to understand. If it says or equivalent, then it could mean some other currencies or even some other forms of assets. So it's just a technicality. How do you make sure that it's $900 billion or equivalent? And also, regarding the time frame, do you mean the first date that the sum is borrowed, or the date of settlement, or the end of financial year, when you consider whether it's the equivalent of $900 billion, because there will be the forex fluctuations? Now, this is a drafting issue. I will give the floor to the DOJ colleague. Thank you for the question. Now, we need to refer to Cap 1 for any person, and a definition is provided, and any person includes natural persons as well as non-natural persons. So institutional investors are included as well. What about or equivalent? Now, like the member said, now we're talking about 900 billion Hong Kong dollars. But as we also explained, the bonds may be issued in other denominations. So it's equivalent, it's an amount equivalent to 900 billion Hong Kong dollars. But the exchange rate changes. So where do we draw the line? When should we take a snapshot of the currency rate? It's a technical point. Well, it's the equivalent on the basis of the rate on the date of bond issuance. Right, Ms. Khan, you want to ask questions for the third round? Thank you, Chair. I'd like to invite the administration to explain this sum, $900 billion. Now, if we take a look at the medium-range forecast in the supplement of the budget, the forecast for the coming 5 years is provided. That is, you estimate that in 2026-27, $160 billion worth of bonds were issued. In 2027, $201 billion, and then 2028-29, $200 billion, so on and so forth. And then for 5 years in total, $970 billion. This resolution provides that the government be approved to borrow from any person from time to time. It doesn't spell out the concept of outstanding debt. So I think it's a point of clarification. Mr. Ronald Chan just now referred to the repayment date in the coming 5 years. Can you explain this concept? Is it possible that in the coming 5 years, at some point, the total amount will exceed $900 billion? You can't really rule this out, because you mentioned 700 billion and then it goes up to 900 this year. And then for the 19.9% debt to GDP ratio, you say that it's kept at bay, but you can't rule out further increasing the ceiling to above $900 billion. So I want you to explain how this relates to the whole cycle.
Just like the final line in paragraph A, at any time, the unpaid principal cannot exceed a total of 900 billion at any time. As you can read from the supplement budget, in the coming 5 years, if you look at the bond issue in the coming 5 years, the amount exceeds 900 billion, because that will be amounts that we need to pay back. We will monitor very closely when we issue our bonds. At any time, the sum cannot exceed 900 billion. If I understand you correctly, the figure 900 billion is hard and fast figure. Hard and fast figure. It cannot be changed. However, the percentage of 99.9 is just a reference, because no one will know how our economy will turn out next year or the year after next. As Permanent Secretary said, we are only borrowing at a very low ratio. So 19.9 is just a reference number. If you compare ourselves with the overseas country, they are borrowing of up to 100%. So this is not the subject. The major focus that we need to pay attention to is the figure 900 billion. Yes, Chairman, you have explained even better than we do. Any further questions? If not, then I see that you don't have any further comments regarding the text of this resolution. I believe that we can give it green light. Upon the completion of the scrutinization, well, according to clause 29 bracket 1, you will also give us a pre-announcement to the Legislative Council. When would that be? Members, do you plan to propose any amendments? If not, then we will follow the timetable proposed by the administration. I expect that it will be the 13th of May. It will come back to the council meeting. And there has to be an announcement made no less than 12 working days. Yes, it's absolutely correct. We do have consensus. So that's it. Any further business? If there is no other business, then meeting adjourned. Thank you.